Thank you so much, Headmaster Bill Taylor, your predecessors, Art Smith and the late Phil Smith, trustees, faculty, everyone from the TP community, my family that's here, and hello to the graduating class of 2023, your proud families and friends. So, you know, your families are here, and some things never change. When I decided, 2 days ago, I was like, Mom, you want to come? And so my mom is here today. And some things really never change. We got into the car, and she pulls out this pin and says, wear this. I'm like, what is this? And it's the Welcome Parents pin from 1984. See, moms, they keep everything, you know? Thank God. Well, for most of us, though. And when I received the email asking me if I was able to speak today, you know, I had to read it twice. You know, I figured something like this would be reserved for like Mo Vaughn, who I went to school with here, you know, Major League Baseball legend and former teammate. And I was so honored. I was like, oh, he must not be available. But and then I looked at the fact that it was right in the middle of Memorial Day weekend holiday. I was like, oh, now I get it. Okay. And, you know, as I sit here today, you know, I think about some similarities that I have with you guys. You know, Cristobal, you know, you started writing your speech 2 days ago. You know, same thing, you know. Some things don't change. Although when I first was asked to speak, I figured I'd just wing it. And then I got an email from the headmaster's office. Can we see the script? I'm like, oh, no, I got homework? But thank God I did, you know, because it made me kind of put some stuff down on paper that I didn't want to forget and that I thought was important to share with you guys today. And another similarity that I have with you guys is that actually this is my first graduation at Trinity-Pawling. See, I actually didn't get the privilege of graduating with my class in 1988. In fact, I better make sure there's no one from the DC committee that's still here. Eric? No. All right, I'm good. But seriously, I didn't make it through my senior year. I was asked to leave. It would be one of a series of failures that I made as a young man that helped change my life, even though I didn't realize it at the time. But clearly, you guys have not made the same mistakes that resulted in my early exit from the school during senior year. But rest assured, you will make your own mistakes in life, some big, some small. And I know they will provide some of your greatest lessons, most of the time even more so than your successes. You're now moments away from having a new title, alumni. However, before it's official, you will have to endure this lecture. And how ironic that it's coming from a guy who was a straight C+, or maybe C, student when I was at TP. But may it leave you with hope that someday you too can be standing up here, regardless of whether you believe it or not today. I arrived at Trinity-Pawling as a 14-year-old Jewish kid from New York City, from a divorced family. I'd been diagnosed with a learning disability as a kid and struggled with academics. It was the fall of 1984. I was scared and I felt like a fish out of water. Perhaps many of you felt the same way when you first arrived. During the next 4 years, I learned a sense of responsibility, independence, and gained confidence in myself. I had wonderful teachers and coaches whose words still echo in my head today, including Mr. and Mrs. Teddy Nealand, who made me feel like one of their own right from the start. One quick story. When I first made varsity football, we were playing a game against Hotchkiss, and I wanted the ball so badly. I just wanted to prove to the coach that, you know, I could do this. I remember Coach Hutchinson saying, give Drath the ball. I know we'll get some yards from him. In the huddle, they called my number. I got the ball and ran through the line of scrimmage. 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, 6 yards, 7 yards, and as I'm churning to try to get one more yard, a defensive player, makes a perfect tackle. His helmet down, hits the ball out of my arm. It's a fumble. It's a turnover. The whistle blew, and I was quickly out of the game. I don't think Mo Vaughn would have this story, by the way, because he was also a back. Great athlete. I remember being on the sidelines so angry at myself and wanting desperately to get back into the game. I didn't want that. I didn't get that chance that day. And that day, that play, that experience is still with me to this day because I still want that ball back. You might be sitting here thinking, oh, what a sad story. But I don't see it that way. I love that memory because it reminds me that I'm still hungry. I could have walked away with just a bad taste in my mouth, but instead, I walked away hungrier than ever to achieve that extra yard. Sometimes it's too soon after a failure to realize its value. It took me some years to learn that this was something positive. However, experience has also taught me that if you look for it, there's always a positive in your failures. Always. When I couldn't graduate with my class, I was angry and resentful. I didn't realize then that the cause and cost for those errors were my own doing. But now, I realize that my failures helped line the path that brought me here today. I would love to say that my troubles ended right after Trinity-Pawling and I turned my life around. Unfortunately, that's not my story either. I went to the University of Arizona where I made another error in judgment and ended up back home the second semester of my freshman year with an outlook as bleak as ever. Just so you know, both at Trinity-Pawling and in Arizona, my failures were related to drugs and alcohol. Little did I know how dark it can be before the dawn. With all my friends away in college and only a construction job as a prospect, I became determined to get the ball back. I made some changes in my life. I started going to meetings to help with my drug and alcohol problem, and I found a new path. I found a faith that to this day has never let me down. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but it was my inner understanding that knew the right thing to do, intrinsically. I realized that it was always there, but for some reason, probably just desperation, I decided to trust it. We all have it. It was, but I was ready, and I always had it, but I was ready to listen to it, and I hope you will too. I needed to get back to school. The prospects of a career without a degree did not seem promising. I applied for some classes at NYU and started to really excel. While I wasn't matriculated, I took it more seriously than studying I had ever done. While working as a busboy and going to school, I happened to meet someone who would become an angel in my life named Peter Johnson, bless his memory. He mentioned that Columbia University had a program for students who had promise but had lost their way. He said I would need to get straight A's at NYU and take a test, and even then, it was no sure bet. Lo and behold, 1 year after leaving the University of Arizona, I was enrolled and on the campus of Columbia University. It would change my trajectory and help me believe that with hard work, faith, and determination, anything was possible. At Columbia, I threw myself into campus life. I joined a fraternity, and one day on my way to lacrosse tryouts, I made a wrong turn and stumbled into the campus radio station, WKCR-FM. When I opened the door and saw the equipment and another student behind the glass reporting the news, I was in awe. 3 weeks later, I got my Class 3 FCC license and was broadcasting the news myself. I had no idea that that would set my future career in motion. Soon after, I applied and was offered an internship at ABC News. It was the beginning of the Persian Gulf War. I realize how long ago that was. You guys weren't even around, but and I was hooked. Getting coffee, running scripts, filing tapes. It didn't matter what they asked. All I wanted to do was be there and learn everything I could. I graduated from Columbia with a solid GPA, and after a couple of smaller jobs, applied to CNN. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia without knowing anyone, and found a home and a team at CNN. Again, I started at the bottom. I was making $17,000 per year as a video journalist. It was really their way of paying us peanuts and giving us a fancy title. I was at the bottom of the barrel. As a VJ, we would work long hours and overnights. We learned how to use the cameras, stage management, teleprompters. It was like school all over again, but this time I was hungry, and I was promoted after taking tests called Newsmakers Test. What I loved most about CNN was that it was a true meritocracy. They didn't care where you were from or what you had previously studied. They rewarded those who worked hard and proved themselves, just like TP. Another lucky turn. A friend of mine told me there was a new network starting in New York. I moved back to the city and helped launch the Fox News channel. It was my dream job back then. Back then, our mantra was, we report and you decide. And we believed that, and that was how we covered the news. Every day was a new assignment, a new lesson, and I didn't take for granted how lucky I was to be doing what I dreamed of. I was sitting across from celebrities and newsmakers like Henry Kissinger, who just a few years before I had studied at Columbia University. One night, a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go to a boxing match. Honestly, I wasn't such a big boxing fan. In fact, I was very tempted to say no and stay at home. But I said yes that night. I went up to the Yonkers Raceway in the Bronx and into a field house, a large metal structure that was normally used to auction off horses. But that night, it was filled with cigar smoke, wise guys, and the excitement of an ensuing battle. One by one, each of the fighters walked through the crowd and into the ring. It was so gladiatorial in nature. I had never seen such a sight and was immediately hooked. It wasn't the boxing itself, it was the environment and the characters who I thought only existed in movies. I found the promoter who would become another angel in my life. I asked him how I could get involved, and he said he'd give me a job as a publicist. Little did I know at that time that being a publicist meant driving a van, picking up fighters at airports, bringing them to motels, getting them towels in the locker rooms, helping them get their medical tests done, and once in a while, writing something for the press. I didn't care. I did anything and everything they asked. I had to start at the bottom again, and I did it happily. Not so happy were my parents, who couldn't understand how a college grad had become, in essence, a glorified driver. However, to be fair, they were impressed with how quickly I could get them a towel. But I had faith that this was a direction that I needed to take. I listened to my inner voice when the outside noise seemed to make the case that this would lead to nowhere, that this was crazy. I became enamored by the fighters themselves and their stories. I wound up becoming an agent and representing over 40 fighters. I traveled to Poland, Germany, England, Budapest, and many other places, bringing fighters known as the B-side in boxing to these fights. They were known as the opponents. I always identified with these guys. They were the underdogs. Surprise, surprise. But I became disenchanted when I realized my fighters were just props who never stood a chance to win. During this period, I spent a lot of time in boxing gyms. There I met a guy named Louis Resto. Louis was a quiet, pleasant man with a dark past. I heard many whispers that he was banned from boxing for life, that he had killed a man, that he went to jail, and that he could never enter a boxing ring again. He was there, living in the basement of a dark, dank gym in the Bronx, training kids. My journalistic instincts perked up, and I knew there was more to the story. Back in 1983, 25 years prior, Louis Resto had fought a fighter named Billy Collins Jr. Billy was an Irish kid from Tennessee, good-looking, undefeated, and what the boxing world always loved. Definitely the favorite that night. But what happened in the ring was a terrible tragedy. Louis would win by upset, and Billy's face would look like he had elephantitis by the end of the fight, his eyes swollen shut beyond recognition. Resto would go over to Billy Collins' corner, as a good sport might, to shake hands with Billy and his father, Billy Collins Sr. Billy's father grabbed Louis's gloves and immediately started yelling, "There's no padding in these gloves! There's no padding in these gloves!" And what ensued after that was a terrible tragedy. Billy Collins Jr. would suffer permanent eye damage, and less than 8 months later was dead. Some said suicide, some said drunk driving. It was unclear. So when I found Louis Resto proclaiming his innocence 25 years later, I knew that I had to tell his story, and I had to uncover the truth. I had no experience in documentary filmmaking, but I had faith deep inside that this was what my next chapter would bring. Again, many, including my parents, thought I was nuts. A year later, I was able to get the rough cut of the film to a friend who was coaching a girls' lacrosse team. One of the parents was an executive at HBO. He watched the rough cut, and Assault in the Ring premiered on HBO 1 year later. We were even lucky enough to win the Emmy for Best Sports Documentary in 2010. I've gone on to make many films since then and have learned many values which I want to share with you. I made a film about Renee Richards, the transsexual tennis player who was born Richard Raskin and played as a female at the US Open in 1977. I learned from Renee that no matter what the world thinks or says, you must be true to yourself, whatever that looks like or however controversial. I made a film about Pete Rose for ESPN, and I learned about a man enslaved in his own hubris, unwilling to admit fault and ask for forgiveness, still banished from his true love and passion, baseball. I made a film about Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard and their legendary fight commonly known as No Mas. I saw the difference between one who had moved on and one who was stuck in the past, refusing to be honest with himself. I made a film about a man, Hector Macho Camacho, who was unwilling to face his own demons and would wind up murdered because of it. His family still searching for closure and meaning. I've made a lot of other films, but one of the most recent ones has perhaps the most poignant message that I can leave with you today. The Dream Whisperer is about a 10-year quest by a now 86-year-old man, New York Knickerbocker legend Dick Barnett, to never give up on your dream. Dick's selfless quest for his civil rights era teammates to make sure they were remembered in the Basketball Hall of Fame show me the importance of having a dream and never giving up. It's my utmost hope that all of you here today may find a dream and a passion and a desire that keeps you up at night, waiting for the excitement of morning. To have a meaning, to have a purpose is one of the greatest gifts a person can have. It will give your life meaning and direction. About 12 years ago, I wrote a letter to Art Smith apologizing for my behavior back in 1988 at TP, asking if I could do service and help in any way with the school and try to make things right. I returned to campus over a dozen times, talking to you boys about filmmaking, sharing rough cuts, and talking about your dreams. Art Smith surprised me one more time and handed me my diploma 26 years later. TP was again there for me, to teach me, to remind me that it's always better to give than to receive. Ask yourself as you go through life, what can I offer to a situation? What service can I do? Not what's in it for me. And I promise that if you go through life with that mindset, life will deliver abundance. Thank you, Phil Smith, for making sure I paid for my mistakes back in 1988. Art Smith for granting me forgiveness, and Bill Taylor for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today and continuing to lead this great institution and its core values forward. The guys sitting next to you will be your brothers for life. As the years progress, these relationships will mean even more. As you go your separate ways for the years ahead, these men will be the foundations of your future relationships and how you meet the world. TP has given you the foundation for independence and a strong character. Go out there, boys, and make us proud. You have the tools. Have faith in God and never quit on yourself. Go deep inside and ask for the next right step, and the answers will come. Believe in your intuition, even when those around you question your choices. Look for angels in your life who are there to help. and most important, be persistent and determined in whatever you set out to accomplish. May God bless you, and to all of you new alumni, I hope that you always have the desire to get back into the game and always want the ball. Go Big Blue, roll Pride.